On a lonely night so long ago, when I was not so cool, a new game came to me. I'd never seen rules so new. I couldn't put it down, designed just like a fever dream. Seemed like a LARP for me, and it called right out to me. Yeah. And yeah, I was the Magic Man. Of course, I'm talking about Mage the Ascension, the third game in the grimdark darkness of the grimdark world of darkness. This is the game that exceeded all expectations. Compared to the neo-gothic vampires and the munchkinized werewolves, here you weren't fighting to save the world, you were fighting to define the world, featuring new mechanics the likes of which that had never been seen. It even started a still ongoing conversation of who were actually the good guys. I'm Mr. Welch, and I'm here to spell things out for you. Mage was released in 1993 with a host of designers, but most famous the Week brothers, Stuart and Stefan. The book itself was written by almost a dozen writers, with Robert Hatch being among one of them, who you might recognize from the Trinity Review, also on this channel. Cover art was minimalist, per the standard White Wolf core book design. Like most White Wolf first editions, it had a short shelf life, because mages in first edition were beyond broken, like turning vampires into lawn chairs with a snap of the fingers powerful. And that wasn't that hard of an ability. So second edition hit in 1995, and that's where this story starts. Mage presented modern wizards like nothing else seen before. Yes, you had the neo-pagan types running around being obnoxious, and drum circles were a thing for some wizards, and a few Merlin types survived into the modern era, but they were the outliers. Magic was the ability to warp reality, and all the rules went out the window because of it. Modern wizards looked like nothing you would imagine. It was all about the battle to control what was even possible, and it was divided between four factions: the insane marauders, the corrupting Nefandi, the organized technocracy, and the loosely allied traditions. The traditions were presented as the good guys, but they were also shown to be deeply fragmented with often contradictory goals. The technocracy started off as monolithic bad guys, but became so popular among players they got their own book detailing the methods and goals of the organization. Mechanically, it's World of Darkness, so same priority character creation system with a few different skills and backgrounds compared to the other games. The magical fuel for Mage is Quintessence, and the mechanic that determines your raw magical power is called Arete. Arete is king. Arete is life. Arete tells you how many dice you get to use magic with. It's capped in creation fairly low, and raising it is expensive but paramount. You have 9 spheres of magic, which determines how you alter reality. The bad stuff is paradox. If you warp reality too much, you get paradox. The best description of paradox is imagine you're on trial for your life and Pee-wee's Playhouse is the courtroom. Too much paradox is very bad. If you're lucky, you'll just explode. The core premise behind Mage is that reality is defined by belief. If people believe something is possible, then it's reality. If they don't believe something is possible, then it's magic. Convincing people that eating this small pill will cure your infection was magic, until the progenitors convinced the world antibiotics were real. Sacrificing your children to make your crops grow was a real thing until people were convinced the verbena didn't know what the hell they were talking about. Science and technology didn't get the Wright Flyer off the ground in 1903. People believing that it could, did. Public relations in Mage is a full-contact sport. Magic is divided into 9 different spheres, each one representing a different aspect of reality. The spheres are correspondence, entropy, forces, life, mind, matter, prime, spirit, and time. The more dots you have in a sphere, the more you control that sphere. Initially, you could just change aspects of it. And at high levels, you could even create things of that sphere. If you wanted to combine 2 spheres to do something like teleport a fireball, you need the right levels of both of them. If a sphere was tied to your tradition or convention, you get a discount when you're leveling up that sphere. If you were an orphan or an unaligned mage, you had no restrictions on how you cast your magic, but your magic overall was more expensive. Mage focused mainly on the 4-way battle for reality. Other supernatural creatures were largely considered pawns at best in the struggle, allies when necessary, and speed bumps if they became problematic. Mages are not as big and strong as werewolves or vampires, but when they can pop somebody's head like a zit with the snap of their fingers, size rarely matters in a fight with a mage. Low-level mages had to watch themselves around other supernatural creatures. High-powered mages were well above most supernatural creatures' weight class. The fight for reality has mechanical effects in Mage. If the people around you don't think your magic was possible according to the rules of the universe, you get paradox. This was a passive effect mostly. If you wanted to avoid tearing apart the fabric of reality, you had to convince the world the magic was possible. If you wanted to blow somebody up and you happened to shoot the Molotov cocktail next to them instead, reality might let that slide, and they call it coincidental magic. You get no paradox that way. If you hit them with a fireball in the middle of a desert, reality is going to ding you slightly with a point of paradox, because there's no one around to see it. If you launch a fireball in the middle of Piccadilly Circus, reality is going to come down on you like a pile of bricks. Paradox is hard to describe, but it's like anti-reality. Bad things happen when you have acquired paradox. You can bleed off small amounts, but that causes reality to warp around you. Maybe your bones turn to rubber for a few minutes, for a few points of paradox. A little bit more might turn your hair permanently paisley. A lot of paradox causes damage, and too much paradox can cause you to explode, or worse. Botching a magic roll will involuntarily burn off paradox, so it's never safe to have any amount of paradox. And though there's always a minimum amount that you're allowed to burn when you do try to get rid of it, having lots of it is very dangerous. The outer conflict in Mage is largely philosophical. Two of the factions aren't playable. The Fandi want to turn the world into hell on earth and have sold their souls to the devil or a similar nasty. Marauders have gone insane with power, emphasis on the word insane. They bring their own private reality to the outside world. The madder they are, the more of their dreamscape overwrites the real world. They're immune to paradox, but can be driven back to the spirit world if enough sleepers or regular people witness them. This leaves the traditions and the technocracy. The traditions largely represent magic users of old, though they have recently added on the steampunk Sons of Ether and the computer hacker virtual adepts. They're a fractured group, with a murderous Euthanatos having little in common with the free love cult of ecstasy or the religious celestial chorus. On the other hand, the technocracy works very well together, but their defined goals can be quite heavy-handed. To kill off a powerful vampire once, they redirected sunlight through orbiting mirrors before hitting said vampire with a nuclear missile. Twice. The traditions are represented as the initial good guys. At least they were in the first core book. The traditions want to return to the ways when their various magic forms were recognized by the sleepers as reality. This makes a lot of the traditions seem callous or selfish because despite the brutal methods the technocracy has employed, they've also improved the lives of the masses. Compare that to the Hermetic Mage, who wants to return magic to the formulas and rotes of the Middle Ages, or a member of the Celestial Course who wants to impose religious edicts on the sleepers to allow them to use their teachings to bring magic to the masses. Both the traditions and technocracies want what is best for humanity, but one is fragmented and reactionary, while the other is unrelenting and uncompromising. This philosophical grudge match was something that Mage players ate up, as both sides had valid points about their methods, as well as the negative traits of their rivals. They might dislike each other, but team-ups against other supernatural threats to sleepers almost always resulted in a ceasefire or even a temporary team-up. There are 9 traditions, with the Hollow Ones, a group of goth-inspired orphans, serving as a de facto 10th tradition, at least in lore, though they will deny it, because that's what mopey goths in the grim dark 90s did. The traditions are allies of convenience for the most part. Many of their stated goals clash with other traditions, but as they were all getting their teeth kicked in by the technocracy, compromises were made. Now they try and restore reality to how it used to be, while hiding out from the technocracy, fighting the Nefandi, and dealing with the other lesser supernatural creatures that threaten mankind. Vampires might be super fast and durable, but they can't teleport people to the middle of the Sahara Desert at high noon with a wave of their hands. Just something to remember when you do a crossover. The first of the traditions is the Akashic Brotherhood, who specialize in mind magic. Think wushu movies and you get an idea of how their magic presents itself. They practice Do, a spiritual martial art that focuses on inner chi, balancing your emotions, and kicking men in black through walls. They are one of the less annoying traditions, though they tend to devolve into stereotypes. Celestial Chorus are the religious mages. While most are played as Christians, they do accept any religion that encourages congregations. They focus on prime magic, and have a bad habit of burning verbena at the stake when the verbena gets too annoying. So about 5 episodes on average. They also tend to get a bit preachy with the other traditions, which is to be expected. The cult of ecstasy are the sex mages. Don't give me the line about how they're there to experience everything in all the forms. It always devolves into sex magic. Sure, they will take enough drugs to give Keith Richards a mild buzz, but they will also pretty much get naked at some point. That made them extremely popular in most mage games, just for some reason. To make the sex last even longer, they have the time sphere. Dream speakers are typically dirty hippies. Take all the spirituality of native shaman, mix in the wisdom of the ancients, and sprinkle in a bit of herbalism, then throw it all out the window. They are hippies. The dream speakers do their drum circle, spend most of their time using the spirit sphere to talk to spirits, and occasionally talk to the rest of the party when they feel like it, usually to ask the cult of ecstasy chick if she has any more drugs. Since they tend to be harmless, and most of them end up being based on Tommy Chong, most players don't have a problem with them. Euthanatos are murder mages. They say they are all about the cycle of life and all, but you only ever see them helping people shuffle off the mortal coil. Not saying that there isn't more to their tradition than murder, I'm just saying I can't recall anybody playing a Euthanatos obstetrician. They focus on the entropy sphere, naturally, which means bad things happen to people they stab. In the party, they're going to be the stab-happy guy, which is great when you have to fight bad guys, but not so much when you have to convince someone of your point of view with an argument, rather than, or else my friend stabs you. The Order of Hermes are the traditional mages. Imagine Merlin in a three-piece. This is actually a holdover from Ars Magica, an old game of White Wolf, where you played wizards and their assistants in the Middle Ages. These guys are the masters of forces. If your motorcycle explodes when you clip a tree, blame a hermetic mage. They're one of the more useful traditions because they are one of the oldest formal traditions. They can disguise their spells better than most, and their ability to blow stuff up at will makes them useful to other mages. Which is great, because they also have the reputation of being some of the most uptight and holier-than-thou pricks in the entire world of darkness. And that is saying a lot. Sons of Ether are the mad scientists of Mage. Formerly a member of the Technocracy, their love of the namesake Ether was their downfall. They wanted outer space to be filled with this breathable gas so they could fly their space cars to Mars. And the Technocracy voted, no, we want a void. So the Sons packed up and left. They are the masters of matter, and originally were distrusted by the traditions for their past. But the traditions found their methods useful, and their hatred toward the Technocracy genuine. They're almost always played for a laugh, usually out-of-place steampunk rejects. The Verbena represent the modern-day pagans like Wiccans. They focus on the life sphere, letting them heal people with their blood magic, and then rub it into the other traditions' faces that they're the one true tradition. Verbena have a really bad reputation for haughtiness. The Hermetics might have their noses parallel to their legs, but at least they know when to hide the magic. Verbena came into the world naked, screaming, and covered in blood, and then never stopped. The more militant ones often antagonize the rest of the party, especially with their hatred of technology and their complete lack of tact. If it wasn't for the fact that they are really good at healing, the rest of the party would gladly point out it's no wonder people burned them. The last of the traditions are the newest, the virtual adepts, or the hacker mages. These guys were just recently part of the Technocracy until a dispute over freedom of the internet. So they contacted some friends in the Sons of Ether and arranged their defection. They still aren't fully trusted as they fully embrace techno-magic compared to traditional forms, but they are eager to prove their worth. They focus on correspondence magic, which means they can get people to new places faster, or just telecommunicate their presence and watch all their friends die live on camera. Remember, these are 1990s hackers, at least at the rise of the dot bomb bubble. Back before Angelina Jolie was married to Billy Bob Thornton. In fact, just watch the movie Hackers repeatedly for inspiration. Virtual adepts tend to be cocky, but useful, and since everyone else was dependent on them for internet porn, quite popular. Opposing them are the Technocracy, 5 factions that long ago agreed to work together to uplift humanity in an organized manner rather than every mage for himself. They started focusing on fields like medicine, invention, finance, exploration, and knowledge. They were quite successful and quickly overshadowed the mage traditions because of their organizational skills. When the population started believing that penicillin was a lot better for you than some random herb, the Verbena lost a lot of their power. Electricity suddenly came from a switch, not a spell, and then the world changed. The printing press brought knowledge to the people and away from the clergy that talked directly to God. Little by little, the traditions lost power to the Technocracy, until they clung only to the vestiges of their original power. The Technocracy are initially presented as the bad guys, but as White Wolf expanded their lore, they started gaining a popularity among the players. They were often heavy-handed, but their motives were the same as the traditions. There were serious threats to humanity in the form of other supernatural creatures. Horrific spirits wanted to breach the gauntlet, the wall between the real world and the spirit world. Nefandi served dark gods that threatened the world. Both the Technocracy and the traditions fought these threats. The Technocracy just did it better. While 4 kids and a talking dog might be able to find the source of a supernatural threat and expose it, a heavily armed strike team with state-of-the-art weapons and sensors backed by air support and satellite intel would probably have a better chance. However, the kids are more than likely going to leave the witnesses alive after the threat has been neutralized. Iteration X are the machinists of the Technocracy. They believe that innovation and invention allows for humanity to seek more knowledge as it frees them up from their normal tasks. They're known for having the coolest gear and the best weapons. The best of them try to get the new tech into the hands of the sleepers as soon as it's approved. The worst of them feel that turning themselves into unfeeling cyborgs is the one true way to ascension. They're famous for being very hard to kill because of their armor and implants, and incredibly dangerous in combat because their weapon class tends to fall into the smoking crater type. The New World Order controls the information. They are the press. They decide what actually happened in history. They focus on mind magic, and are known for being insidious gits, rarely trusted by other Technocracy agents. They try and cover up supernatural events to protect the sleepers from mind-shattering discoveries. Player characters are often the intelligence agents for the parties, providing all the research needed to start an adventure. The worst of the NWO are in charge of making people disappear, and never offer a reason for anything they do, no matter how questionable. Progenitors are the doctors of the Technocracy. They focus on high-powered medicine, though they are also greatly feared in combat because they make some awesome magic pills that work as combat drugs. They have a real bad habit of playing God, and possess some of the most ethically compromised mages in the entire game. However, the progenitors who believe in what they say are the reverse, bringing medicines and cures into a world that badly needs them as fast as possible. The Syndicate are the money mages. They manipulate the economy, bring things to the market, and are heavily involved in recruiting new members of the Technocracy. At their worst, they are the greediest creatures on the planet and in the void, only concerned about increasing their portfolio. There is a reason why the resources background for a Syndicate mage is rarely less than 5. But they also excel at bringing new ideas and new technologies to the masses quickly. They are the masters of public relations and marketing, and if your mage needs new gear, make friends with a Syndicate mage. Void Engineers are some of the hardest mages to work into a campaign, as these are the astronaut mages. By astronauts, I mean they spend most of their time in the spirit world, which doubles as outer space in mage. There are Void Engineers still exploring Earth, but their very definition tends to keep them out of cities. They are the first in line of defense against extraplanar horrors, and Void Engineer Space Marines are known as some of the toughest badasses in all of the World of Darkness. The Marines will track down their targets if they get to Earth, but they aren't exactly gentle with witnesses. Their version of the Neuralizer might have an erase button, but the rewrite button is optional. Mage is rather unique of most of the World of Darkness games because the good guys and the bad guys can often be frenemies, especially in low-power campaigns. The Council of Traditions and the Technocracy Board of Directors might be mortal enemies with no hope of reconciliation, but a Euthanatos that picks his targets carefully might get a tip from an NWO desk jockey where a Nefandi nest might be. You can absolutely play the Technocracy up as pure evil, but the utter gray-on-gray mentality of the Mage Wars was refreshing for players compared to the solid black and white of Werewolf and the inhumanity built into Vampire. Mages do crossovers with other games fairly well, even Wraith. Mages are some of the few creatures that can cross into the spirit world like werewolves. In fact, werewolves get along famously with certain traditions like Dream Speakers and Verbana. A Glasswalker or a Ventru Vampire might do their banking with a known Syndicate mage. The NWO might hold their nose at a Bone Gnawer or a Sluagh Fey, but they will be careful to record every bit of information that they are paying for. Remember, mages are squishy humans. Without magic, they will die from an aggravated attack. But they're also reality warpers, which gives them far more in terms of abilities than vampire disciplines or werewolf gifts. Note with crossovers that other supernatural creatures are immune to paradox. Humans instinctively know about vampires, ghosts, fairies, and werewolves and treat them as real, even if they don't know it personally. The Technocracy tends to treat most supernaturals as threats, though they can work with ones they find useful. The traditions are on a case-by-case basis. They understand fully the broad spectrum the other creatures can have, ethically, but learning which ones can be trusted and which ones are pure evil can be tricky. Mages have their own set of foes. The Technocracy have a ton of vat-grown cyborgs ready to hunt down rogue mages. Hitmarks are basically Terminators only with built-in weaponry like chain guns. The Men in Black are mass-produced clones that serve as spies for the NWO. The Progenitors can create all sorts of genetically modified nightmares at a moment's notice. The only thing holding them back is the public's perception of what's possible. Bad things happen to constructs if a sleeper spots one doing impossible things. Bad guys from other games, like the Fomori, Sabbat, or Unseelie, don't have this problem, so crossovers are very popular, at least for villains. Considering mages are there to protect humanity, throwing things at them that are specifically there to harm humans is always a good thing. There are other mages in the world that operate outside the Mage War in the form of crafts. These are smaller groups that consider both sides of the war self-righteous douchebags. They tend to be regionally based, often in remote areas where modern society hasn't reached. They can be friend or foe, but they're very devoted to their paradigm of magic, and are often just as thick-headed as the larger factions they detest. Ask your storyteller if you want to play one, as certain crafts can disrupt a party due to these guys not normally playing well with others, unlike the tradition or the Technocracy. Mage is popular because of the just absolute freedom it provides players, along with the balancing factor of paradox that kept players from getting too out of control. It doesn't have spell lists like Dungeons & Dragons. They had examples of spells called roads that were presented to you, but these were just starting suggestions. Your imagination powered your character. If you could dream it, you could often do it. Yes, you had to tap dance a lot when it came to keeping magic coincidental, but that was definitely part of the charm of the game. The players were making up the rules as they went. The storyteller was there to remind them of what happened if they pushed too hard. Mage is available over on the Storyteller's Vault in all its versions. Most of it for about list prices, POD. If you want to jump into Mage, there's no reason not to get all the books. If you plan to run them with bad guys from other games, there's a lot of bad guy books to be found in Werewolf, especially with the Pentex-related books. In fact, the Technocracy book mentions that the Syndicate and Pentex are well aware of each other, with some members of the Syndicate in bed with Pentex because, again, money, and others seeking to stamp it out and eradicate it, which makes for a great adventure with Werewolf, but how well the Guru are going to play with the Money Mages is up to you. So that concludes Mage the Ascension. There's multiple versions of the game, though the 3rd edition advanced the meta plot into the World Ends, Everybody Dies timeline, and was generally considered by fans to be a very bad idea. The 20th anniversary updates the game to a more modern setting, but ditches the meta plot and lets you run things as you want. I consider Mage the best of the World of Darkness games. It's the first game in the series where you had reasons to work together without internal conflicts between the heroes already written into the plot. Made writing adventures a lot easier. Next up on Mad Musings, we are taking on the Boogeyman with Little Fears by K20 Publishing. Get ready to confront all your childhood fears in a game that actually won an award for Most Disturbing RPG. So until then, remember this: they only come out at night. They always come out at night.